I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and today I'm reviewing this Mercedes-AMG CLS 53. The CLS 53 is one of our favourite current generation Mercedes-Benz products, and that's because while Mercedes of today makes a lot of cool products, things like the G-Wagon or the A45 and CLA 45 AMG, it doesn't make that many elegant cars anymore, which is something that this brand used to be all about. The S-Class and the E-Class are pretty nice, but this CLS 53 also joins that relatively limited club of understated, luxurious Mercedes-Benz cars that you can buy here in Australia and just know that you've kind of made it. Now, this CLS 53 is technically an AMG product, but as we'll find out in today's video, it doesn't feel very AMG-y. It goes pretty hard, it's got a 320 kilowatt straight six under the bonnet with a 48 volt mild hybrid system, and it does have quad tailpipes and flourishes like that. But this vehicle is actually about moving quickly in luxury, and for me, that's exactly what Mercedes means. So in today's video about the CLS 53, we'll have a look at the interior of this car, the back seat and the boot. We'll discuss the running costs of this vehicle, and then we'll head out onto the road in the 2022 Mercedes-AMG CLS 53 to see what this vehicle is like to drive. And then I'll give you my verdict about whether or not you should buy one of these yourself if you can handle the rather indulgent price tag of $186,000, which is certainly not cheap. But before we make a start, hit subscribe, and I'm going to share with you the 3 things I like best about this car and the 3 things that I don't particularly like. The first thing that I love about the CLS is the styling. This is a really cool looking car, and I think the current generation of CLS pulls it off better than any previous iteration of this 4-door coupe. Mercedes-Benz pretty much invented this segment with the CLS, and I think this one really does it well. AMG's crowd pleaser might be the 4-litre V8, but my favourite powertrain they make is actually the 53, which is a 3-litre straight 6 petrol. It sounds absolutely beautiful. It also has a strong 48 volt mild hybrid system that means there's virtually no lag in this system. It just gels so well out on the road, and it really fits the character of the CLS. The ride and handling of the CLS 53 is excellent. Even though it has these big 20-inch wheels, it's comfortable enough to daily this car easily. It's almost plush, not quite. There is still an underlying stiffness that reminds you it is an AMG product, but it handles well. The body control of this vehicle is excellent, and you kind of just forget about the suspension, which is exactly what you want with a 3-pointed star. The interior design of the CLS is very beautiful in my opinion. I love the open pore black wood, and even though this car has a black interior, you can actually go for macchiato beige, which is absolutely stunning. But the quality isn't quite there, and we see that a lot on Mercedes-Benz cars of today. Listen to this. I mean, given that you brace against the steering wheel when you're braking into a corner, that's really off-putting. Another thing I don't like about the CLS 53 is that, like so many other Mercedes-Benz products here in Australia, you can't get a non-AMG version of this car with a good engine. In fact, you can't get a non-AMG CLS at all. It's exactly the same for the E-Class, which this car is related to, where if you want a non-AMG, you have to take a 4-cylinder, and none of the 4 cylinders are particularly good that Mercedes-Benz put in that vehicle. So you have to have an AMG, you have to have massive wheels, you have to have this Panamericana vertical slatted grille, which some people love and some people hate. Personally, I find myself pining for an elegance trim with, you know, burl wood grain and stuff inside, but maybe that's just the old man in me. Because it's an AMG, the CLS 53 has these sport seats with tall bolsters. The backrest is very comfortable, but the seat squab doesn't quite suit my legs. The bolsters here are quite tall, and that actually leaves the inner of my leg and under my knee floating in the air, and after a couple of hours driving, I just didn't find it as supportive for my legs as I was hoping to do. Jumping down into the very driver-focused cockpit of the CLS 53 is a pleasant experience because I really like the interior design of this vehicle. It's definitely busy, it is a little bit showy, but not quite to the same extent as some other Mercedes-Benz products, and if you do things like turn off the pink ambient lighting or switch it to just a nice neutral color, then I guess it does kind of evoke that sort of luxury car mindset that Mercedes-Benz always used to be about. I think a lot of the interior design of current Merc vehicles is a little bit more targeted towards sort of Instagram, TikTok post mentality, which is very, very showy and dramatic rather than kind of a little bit deeper and more interesting. But the CLS and the E-Class and the S-Class are a little better than that, I think. Now, love the open pore wood grain trim that's on this car. It looks really good, nicer than carbon fiber in my opinion. This vehicle is conservatively specified with black leather on the AMG sport seats. It's perforated, the quality is excellent, and I even quite like the little strip of Alcantara on the outside of the bolsters of the wheel. It's just that I would spend, I think it's $900 to option macchiato beige, which would really lift the lightness of this interior and would give it even more texture and richness and make it feel more luxurious again. So I guess the colors, the design, and the shapes in here are nice. We have this big cowl, beautiful stitching, absolutely dead straight stitching in this car as you'd expect, including wrapping right around the dashboard, nice grained leather up here, and that houses twin 12.3-inch screens. The center one's a touchscreen, there's a trackpad down here as well, and there's a trackpad on the steering wheel. I'll come back to that in a second. The Mercedes-Benz software in the screen is actually relatively easy to use and relatively straightforward, though it was even easier when Mercedes used to have a rotary dial, a bit like BMW. You don't get wireless smartphone mirroring, oddly enough. You have to use a cable, and even then CarPlay doesn't take up the whole screen, which feels a bit undercooked in the year 2022. But you do get a Burmester stereo, which it's okay. It's not as good as the Harman Kardon, and certainly not as good as the Bowers & Wilkins Diamond stereo that you can option in this car's BMW rival, the M850i Gran Coupe. It's not in the same league as something like a Volvo Bowers & Wilkins stereo. It's just fine. Very, very bassy, but not as clear as I would generally look for in a luxury grade stereo in a car. Now, in front of the driver, we have the same display of size and color as the center, but it's customizable with 2 dials, or you can go for a super sport theme with just a central AMG tachometer. This is very customizable. You can put a full map there. It works really well, and I quite like it. What I don't love so much is this new Super Sport steering wheel. I really like the way it looks. I think it looks absolutely spectacular. This little airbag cover and these twin spokes, a Manatino switch for the drive modes, customizable switch down here for things like disabling ESC or putting the loud exhaust on. It looks fantastic. Perforated Napa leather, metal paddle shifters, that's all good. The functionality is the problem, because the shortcut keys, which are based on haptic touch, are far, far, far too small to be usable. So you routinely select the wrong thing. Changing the song is really difficult because you've got to get your swipe exactly right on the right-hand upper switch. And for anybody whose eyesight, up-close eyesight, is not that great, it's going to be very hard to see these buttons while you're driving. I don't mean you're driving along with poor eyesight, but if you're long-sighted, for instance, this is going to be a real challenge, I think. And it just makes me miss the older wheel, which had actual physical buttons that were a lot more usable. The other issue with this steering wheel is the steering column itself, which is creaky in this particular car. Listening, that's not very Mercedes-Benz. The build quality generally for this vehicle is good. There's absolutely no creaks and rattles from the center console, and I didn't notice any other rattles in this vehicle across broken up Australian terrain. And as a rule, we have been noticing increasing quality on Mercedes-Benz vehicles in recent years, but that isn't in league with that finding. Now, electric seat controls are up here on the leather finished and stitched doors. They're all easy to use, but that brings me on to the comfort of the seat, which is excellent in the backrest. We've got big bolsters here. You can't tighten them, which is a bit of a shame, but thankfully they're already in the right position for me. The issue is the squab, which has tall outer bolsters, which actually lifts your leg a little bit too much, and you feel like the inner of your leg is floating. And so the squab just wasn't quite shapely enough or correct enough for my legs, but that's very much a person by person thing. Make sure you test drive the car and see if it suits you, because it may well. Otherwise, everything's finished nicely. Storage wise, we've got big cup holders, wireless charging, flock lined door bins, which are really lovely. And then up here on the black headliner, we have just a smaller sunroof, but we have just a manual sun blind. That's fine. I think it's one less thing to go wrong. And it's nice and quick and easy just to open or close it at will. So up front, it's a bit of a mixed bag, but on the whole, I like it. Let's check out the back seat. A few decades ago, car reviews in Australia would often bring out the cliche, a big car for a big country. Well, we're in a big country and we're also in a big car because the CLS is just shy of 5 meters in length, and you can definitely transport adults or teenagers in this car as long as they're not taller than about 6'1", because for myself at 6 foot, if I sit up straight, I've got about an inch of headroom. But I am comfortable. This car worked absolutely fine for me in the back. And the back seat itself is really supportive and lovely. So I could definitely do a few hours back here, say if you wanted to take friends away to a winery or something like that, or on the way to a school sports game. This is totally doable, particularly because the back seats are actually supportive. They're like little sports seats mimicking what's up front. That means that life for the person in the middle will be pretty dismal. The first CLS vehicles only had 4 seats. That's what, 15 years ago or something. They now do have a 5th seat belt, but you won't want to be using that too often, especially because the hump in the floor is massive. But for 4 adults, it's totally fine. Legroom behind myself is good. Toe room is quite tight, if I'm honest. I do have my driving position or my driver's seat as low as it will go. Got air vents back here, the same sort of cool aviation style air vents is up front. We've got a little console with 2 more USB-C ports and an ashtray if you feel like lighting up. And we've got flock-lined door bins and leather toppers on the doors, Burmester speaker and the open pore wood. So it still feels like really high quality back here. The windows are definitely on the smaller side because this is a 4-door coupe, as Mercedes refers to it as, but I can still see out just fine. But of course, if family transport is the name of the game, then something like a GLE SUV is probably going to be a little bit more up your alley. Moving around now to the attractive backside of the CLS 53. It's a pretty clean looking vehicle. This is high-tech silver. It is a nice deep silver as they go, but there are a number of more interesting colors available that you can order the CLS in as well. Now, we have AMG badging, we've got CLS 53, and we have quad tailpipes, the round type that you get on the 53, which are different to the square type that you get on a 63 product with the 4-litre V8 engine. Now, we have a flip-up badge here, which is how you open the power tailgate, and that reveals the 490-litre boot. 490 litres is a little arbitrary. Also slightly arbitrary, I guess, is the amount of soccer balls you can get in, but hey, that is our uniform measure. And it's 43 soccer balls on the CLS, so we can lock or just close the boot from the controls at the rear end here. And with that out of the way, let's discuss the running costs. So what's it going to cost you to run a CLS 53? Well, when it comes to fuel consumption, the 53 series engine is actually really good. AMG claims 9.2 litres per 100 kilometres on the combined cycle, and in our testing we got 10.5, which is close enough, and we certainly weren't shying away from exploiting the full 320 kilowatts of power that you get in this vehicle. And certainly compared to an AMG GT 4-door sedan with the 4-litre V8, you are going to be saving 30–40% on fuel costs, which is pretty nice. Now, when it comes to servicing, the CLS 53 ain't cheap. Now, you can buy an upfront servicing plan and save a bit of money from Mercedes-Benz, but it's still going to cost you $6,150 for 5 years. But the distance intervals that you're able to go with Mercedes-Benz products is longer than many rivals. So compared to something like an Audi S7, this car is actually going to let you do those country road trips without having to service it as often on a kilometre basis. And finally, the warranty on the vehicle is 5 years with unlimited kilometres. Audi has just matched that, but BMW have not. So this vehicle does give you a bit more long-term dependability or peace of mind than, say, a M850i. So what is the CLS 53 like to drive? Well, I always enjoy driving one of AMG's 53 series vehicles, or a Mercedes-Benz fitted with this straight-six 3-litre turbo petrol engine. But the thing is, it's a rare opportunity to actually drive it in a non-AMG product. The last one I can remember driving that wasn't an AMG was the S-Class, S450, the new S-Class. And that's a lovely car, partially because it isn't an AMG. Nothing against AMG, it's just that these days it's very difficult to buy a Mercedes-Benz with what I would kind of call adequate performance for the price without going for one of the AMG models. You can't get a 6-cylinder E-Class in luxury spec. You can no longer get a 6-cylinder CLS in luxury spec. So you've got to go for the AMG dressing. But the good news is that in the case of the E53 and this CLS 53 and also the GLE 53, they don't really feel like AMGs. They have sorted ride and handling, which is a good thing. That's not necessarily an AMG attribute though, it's just the mark of a well-engineered vehicle. But what they are is they're actually a little more luxurious and a little more refined than they are out and out sporty, which from my perspective at least is exactly what I'm after in a vehicle like this. So that means we can concentrate on what the CLS is good at and bad at, kind of rather than it feeling like a compromised performance vehicle, which I don't think should be the main objective of this particular model. So what have we got under the bonnet? Well, now the only engine you can get in Australia in the CLS is this 3-litre single turbo inline 6-cylinder petrol engine, relatively new engine for Mercedes. It may only be a single turbo, but it's hooked up to a very effective 48-volt mild hybrid system, which does actually add both power and torque to the outputs of the engine, but the basic outputs themselves are already pretty beefy, 320 kilowatts of power and 520 newton meters of torque, to which the hybrid system adds a very handy 250 newton meters of extra twist. So you never feel like this car is laggy in any way. It always feels strong. And for the seat of my pants, it does feel like it has about 700 newton meters of torque when you get on it, which is pretty much what matches up to the combined outputs of the engine and the hybrid system. So that's cool. And those systems send torque to all four wheels via a 9-speed torque converter automatic transmission. This transmission is pretty intuitive, left to its own devices, and it really changes based on what drive mode that you've selected for the vehicle. So at the moment I'm in individual mode, which I've selected through the Manatino switch on the steering wheel, but the actual engine of the vehicle and the transmission are set to sport mode. Not sport plus, so they're just a little bit more aggressive than normal, but it just dials out a little bit of doughiness in the throttle and the transmission, which is how I would describe their behavior in comfort mode. In sport mode, they just feel kind of nice and proactive. The vehicle downshifts intuitively as you brake towards a corner, and it just pretty much always feels like it's in the right gear. But you can take over with the nice metal paddle shifters behind this steering wheel if you want to, and if you do that, it's not dual clutch quick, but it's not the slowest transmission out there. It's just a perfectly serviceable auto in this car, probably a little bit better than serviceable, I would say. Now, the engine is a quick one, the vehicle is a quick one, particularly for a car that weighs 1,900 kilograms. We weighed it at 1,919 with a full tank of petrol. It just feels burly, this car. It's got a really nice amount of torque, but because it is a straight six, it wants to rev a little bit more than the V6 petrols that Mercedes put into their 6-cylinder cars for many years in an interim between the old inline 6 and the new inline 6. It's a nice thing that they've returned to this more traditional style of German 6-cylinder engine. It's certainly never lacking for performance in this car, and it always feels just right. You can jump into any gap in traffic, and then out on the open road, it's alert, it's immediate, throttle response is just excellent. Largely thanks to the 48-volt mild hybrid system. So it's a very, very pleasant engine in this car, and I actually prefer it to the 63 series, the 4-litre petrol V8. That is an awesome, awesome engine, and I'll never turn down an opportunity to drive a car with it. I just think that this engine is more polished, more sophisticated, more refined, and it delivers awesome performance with like a 30–40% cut in real-world fuel consumption, which is good. You know, efficiency is one of our criteria for evaluating cars. Efficiency meaning doing more with less, not just using less petrol out of the gate. But, you know, just like the E53, even more so I would say in the CLS 53, the ride and handling of this vehicle is actually really special. When you're poodling around town, the adaptively damped suspension definitely has a slightly sporty edge to it, but it's never uncomfortable in comfort mode. But then the body control, when you start dialing up the pace, is really good. So winding out. Sorry about that. Just winding out that pleasant 6-cylinder engine there. building up a little bit of pace to talk about the ride and handling at speed, which is really impressive. The body control is good. You certainly get a sensation that the center of gravity is nice and low, and this vehicle doesn't feel as hefty as its measured weight suggests that it is. Certainly you know that you're driving a big car. There's no real hiding of that fact, but it contains its weight well. The Yokohama Advan Sport tires are good ones. They communicate what's going on at all four corners. You feel yourself losing grip kind of linearly. There's communication there. And the 4MATIC Plus all-wheel drive system does actually feel distinctly rear biased. So on a wet day or with a bit of grease on the road, dialing in, kind of assertively dialing in some throttle definitely does result in a bit of power oversteer from the rear end, which is, really nice. The steering is good. It's very Mercedes. It's got a little bit of meat to it in terms of weight, and it's quick and direct. It's a pleasant steering rack to use, and the steering wheel itself feels really good in the hand. I have complained a bit about the functionality of the shortcuts on the wheel, but the actual wheel is comfortable. And I've got the dynamics in what AMG call moderate, I think, at the moment. And that feels about right. The steering's not too heavy. The ESC intervention is not really notable if you're not driving like a headless chook. Much like the engine and the gearbox, it all just comes together really well. When you drive a performance car, you know pretty quickly if it's sort of an intuitive feeling vehicle that works with you, that makes it easy to string together corners, or one where you're always fighting against it. And this CLS doesn't make you fight against the car. It works with you. It wraps around you like a glove. I really, really like driving it. Not sponsored content. This is just a well set up vehicle that is a pleasure to drive, whether you're running down to the shops for some milk or you're actually seeking out a driver's road like I'm doing now. Refinement could be a touch better. There is a bit of road noise on coarse chip. Sporty, big, wide tires will do that. But the safety systems I really like. There's a quick access menu to turn off lane keep assist at will. But when it's turned on, it does actually help you. It sort of glues the car to the center of the lane, makes it easy to drive on adaptive cruise on a long highway road trip, for instance. But being able to turn that stuff on and off when you want it quickly without kind of having to dive through 17 menus is, pleasant. And a bit of overrun and crackle from the performance exhaust too doesn't hurt. It's a nice experience driving this car. So those are my thoughts on the Mercedes-AMG CLS 53 4MATIC Plus. This is one of the best vehicles that Mercedes-Benz currently make. It's an elegant vehicle. It's quick, it's powerful, it's torquey, it rides and handles really well, it's well suited to Australian roads, and it's not just another large luxury SUV. It might be parked next to an SUV in a hypothetical garage at home, but this vehicle gives you space, pace, and grace without having to buy a crossover. And I think that if you're not completely sold on, driving a massive vehicle on the road, and instead you still think that there's value to sedans, as I do, then considering the CLS is the way to go if you've got 186 grand burning a hole in your pocket. So let me know your thoughts down below this video in the comments. Do you like the CLS? Do you own a CLS? If so, how has it been for you? While you're down there, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell. And as always, thank you for watching Chasing Cars.